Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Overcoming Common Pitfalls and Achieving Data Agility, Unlocking Success in Data Governance as a part of this Bright Talk summit that we're having on improving data quality. Today, we're going to be joined by myself, Phil Miller. I'm the Customer Success Manager here over at MarkLogic, and I work with Jeremy on a number of different initiatives. Jeremy is the founder of SmartLogic, the company that MarkLogic acquired last year. He's an engineer by training and spent much of his career solving enterprise information management problems. Prior to SmartLogic, Jeremy was the managing director of Microbank Software, a US fintech firm, and it was acquired by SunGard Data Systems. And Jeremy has a Bachelor's of Science with honours in mechanical engineering from Edinburgh University. The topics we're going to cover today, we're going to do, we've just done the quick introduction. We're going to do the presentation. Jeremy's going to walk through some of the key trends and decisions and reasons why data governance is so important, not just to the IT, but to the business itself. And then I'm going to have a conversation with Jeremy. I'm just going to ask him some questions about the presentation that I'll note down along the way. But we really want to hear from you as well. We really love to have a great Q&A at the end. So if you can submit your questions to us, we'll make sure we get to as many of those as we can as the session finishes. If we can't get to your questions, then we'll make sure that someone follows up with you to get you the right answers. Without further ado, I will pass you over to Jeremy. Jeremy.
Greetings, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this live or listen to it later or listen to it on the web. So why am I putting up a picture here of doom and disaster? And why is data governance important? So let me tell you a story. 2:30 in the morning, a lady called Irma woke up to the sound of police pounding on her door. She was dazed and bleary, and she was told she only had 5 minutes to evacuate before the Coyote Creek overflowed its banks and flooded her apartment. This happened to many people. It was reported in the LA Times that other people said, oh, it was like being in an aquarium. We were looking out and the water was above our windows. And so, you know, the tragedy, no one was killed, thankfully. But throughout the day and into the night, police and firefighters were going door to door in boats to tell people to evacuate. When all was said and done, the 50,000 residents of San Jose, which is America's 10th largest city, were urged to leave their homes as a 100-year-old flood swept through the city and destroyed their neighborhood. So what's the relevance of this? Well, if the first time a resident is aware that they need to get out of a home is when they see a firefighter in a boat, then clearly there's been a failure. So why the short notice? It actually turns out that the lack of warning was due to a data quality problem. And so whilst this is an extreme example, we have data quality problems in our businesses all the time. And data governance is essentially about ensuring high quality data. And if we look a little deeper into the data quality problems, the original hydrologists, so those are the water engineers, they estimated that the capacity of Coyote Creek was 7,400 cubic feet per second, when in fact the true cubic feet per second was closer to 4,000, which was far below the 6,000 cubic meters per second coming off the reservoir. And then you ask yourself, well, maybe the data that drove the model was inaccurate. Maybe the calculations used to build the model were wrong. Maybe the model worked, but the data coming into the model was wrong. Or maybe everything was right with the data, but its meaning wasn't clear because it was presented without the context. So switch a bit. At SmartLogic, we've got great engineering staff. And when we create new software, they break down the capability we want to include, they design the creative solutions, and they estimate how long it will take to perform the various tasks. Our management team take those estimates and use them to make decisions. And I bet everyone here does something similar, but it's in your line of business. Clearly, we weren't involved in the San Jose floods, and we know nothing about hydrology. but we do know our business just as you know yours. And we know that when we get an estimate from engineering, there is context that comes with it. We use that context to decide what we can do with that estimate. We know how much confidence we can have in it. We know how much we can trust it. We make judgments armed with the facts, the context, and our own experience. Something we all do every day in our own particular line of the work. We wouldn't be able to make good decisions if we didn't have that context. And I'm guessing that the hydrologists at the Santa Clara Valley Water District knew their data pretty well. I bet they understand the context of their data, but when that data is boiled down to just a few numbers, that context is lost. When the data is held in multiple places, the data is difficult to see as a whole. When, as in this case, critical data is held in hydrologist reports, it's hard to know if it's been included in the digital data set. So our traditional way of working with data is messy. It's incomplete and it's laden with assumptions which we can't see or have actually been lost. So our traditional way of working with data is messy. It's incomplete and it's laden with assumptions which we can't see. And so as a parallel, right? When criminals steal a lot of money, they go through a process to strip it of its provenance, its lineage, and its traceability, so that it's impossible to know where it came from. That's called money laundering. But that's essentially what happened to this data. It's been laundered. Now, the traditional way of working with data does this all the time. Data professionals have different names for it, but they refer to it as ETL, as MDM, normalization, and it's partly the limitations of relational data models, partly the effects of multiple silos, and partly the effects of not having a single place to go for all your data, regardless of it, together with what that data means. So what I want to discuss today is why our MarkLogic single unified data platform with data governance built into its core, alongside its multi-model metadata management and search capabilities, is so powerful. I'll show you why governance should not be thought of as an overhead. Some people even say, oh, governance, that's a tax on our data. It's not. It's why it's vitally important for data quality, data security, data integrity. So what is GRC? Governance is stuff you do to mitigate risk and manage compliance. It's the best way of describing it. Risk is often associated with governance because that's bad stuff you don't want to happen. And compliance is stuff you have to do because someone says so. So here's some frequently asked questions about enterprise data governance. What is it? It's the process of managing the availability, the usability, the integrity, and the security of the data used in an organization. So that sounds pretty important because any of those things failing to materialize gives you a bad data experience. Why is it important? Well, because we want our data to be reliable, trustworthy, secure, and fit for its intended use. So why don't we all have it perfect? Well, it's difficult to achieve. There's complexity. Organizations have a lot of data stored in multiple systems and locations, making it difficult to manage and govern effectively. Okay. I think the point about achieving effective data governance, it's a combination of technical, organizational, and business culture being brought together for data success. Our point would be, and the point of this thing is, we're going to focus more on the technical in this talk, but equally it's a team sport. It's technical, organizational, and business culture being brought together. But I hope I'll show you why a single unified data platform with governance at its core sitting side and doing what it needs to do with the data that is in the data platform, seriously reduces the effort for the organizational and the business cultural, because it's easier and much more agile to implement. So governance is at the center of the data world. So we can look at, this is a mind map, if you like, of all the things we do with our data. You can pick out the things that you're interested in or not, but right at the center, when we talk about data quality, all the things I've talked about a minute ago, right, you wouldn't imagine why governance would be separate from the data. So why is often governance thought of as a separate application when it is at the center of every data thing we do? It makes much more sense to have it built in as a core part of the data platform, and that's what we do. I couldn't go through a governance chat without mentioning FAIR. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it is worth looking at if you've got if you're particularly interested in the subject. It's a set of principles for data management to ensure that data is well governed, it's transparent and usable, and things. But what I wanted to show you on the left-hand side of the screen is the role of metadata in governance. If we look there, you'll see under findable, there are 2 mentions of metadata in the principles. If you look at accessible, there's 3rd mention of metadata. If you look at the interoperable bit, there's a 4th mention of metadata. And if you look at how you make stuff reusable, there's a 5th mention. So metadata is right at the core of information governance, because it is metadata, or data about data, or information about information, that actually is how you represent your governance and its state, and how it applies and is used against the real world data that you have in your operational systems. So to introduce and really just to hack back to this series that we've been running on Visionary, let's remember that our focus is about solving complex data. Our mission is changing the way the world works with and uses data by providing a single unified data platform that unlocks data value, accelerates insightful decisions, and securely delivers data agility. Many of the words used in that mission are inferred in the whole governance mission, and it's not a coincidence, because your data ungoverned is not useful data. When I look at the core piece of the single unified data platform, we're really looking at 2 core bits. The multi-model databases are becoming increasingly popular as organizations seek to adopt more flexible and agile approaches to data management. It's allowing companies to change their business requirements and adopt emerging technologies. And the other side of the multi-model is the semantic AI, which refers to the use of artificial intelligence to enable computers to understand, interpret the meaning of human language. Semantic AI is a subfield of AI, focused on making computers understand human language and concepts. And that's my background. And that's what is Semaphore. But when you combine the 2, the multi-model being able to ingest your data as is from the source systems, enhance and harmonize it as you need to, preserve all its metadata and context, right? In combination with adding in the ability to model documents and relationships and express those relationships in a meaningful way, coupled tightly with the data, you have really the very best platform for not just data governance, data security, data unity, data quality, and data context. But today is all about data governance. So when we look a little deeper and I'll show you, I'll come back onto the full governance pitch shortly. When we look at the full spectrum of what the data platform's doing, is the first thing is we're connecting any data, any application, any architecture of any workflow. And then where the governance is coming in is in the creation and the interpretation to create a single enriched data resource, which we then consume as a search application or as a data for driving, your applications, or for grounding data for analytics, or for facts-based intelligence, which is a particular metadata type of intelligence. But when we see the architectures that this kind of platforms being implemented on, we see the architectures of data catalog, data fabric, data hub, both meta and metadata, and data management, and data and text analytics, driving and solving initiatives, everything from app modernization through to information security and governance, where the business outcomes are improved customer experience, faster products to market, full auditable compliance solution, and the ability to accelerate smarter decisions. I think what's important here, though, is when you remember that connect, create, consume, what we're really doing is making data and treating data as a supply chain. Because when you treat data as a supply chain, we get to put governance at its center. We get to create data from source records of truth. We get to manage the metadata to drive real-time interpretation of data. And it's at this middle bit, the create, where we're actually making sure that the data is not just governed, but it's also put into context. We've checked its quality, we've interpreted, we may even have created data from documents of record to add and complete the data set. And it's also interpreting the security in a very profound way. So this is a way of, once you start to see the world as data as a supply chain, where you can be sure that as the data moves through its life cycle and its workflows, that actually it is always accompanied by governance, by context, by quality, by unity and security. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is consume high quality contextual data. So I just draw your attention to the fact that we saw the relevance of metadata in the beginning. We're talking about data governance today, but data governance is represented, its state, if you like, is represented in the metadata. It's not represented by the data element itself, in the sense that that data element is something about something, something that represents a piece of business or a bit of analysis or whatever, and that is the data in its rawest form. Governance is a second order higher, where, if you like, we're getting back to its quality, we're being able to understand its provenance, we would need to understand its lineage, and those attributes are held in metadata. So the reason why this multimodal, unified multimodal semantic AI, single unified data platform is so powerful is because we're coupling that operational data, which here is represented on the top, which is the typical, it's a bit of graph data with a bit of JSON with a bit of key value, which might also, we could add in temporal, and we could put in documents into the types of data model that the platform is supporting. But we're not just taking the data itself, we're attaching to that data its metadata, its meaning. So you've got one place to go for data and everything you know about that data. And some of that, what you know about that data, is its governance. And that's active metadata, because it's active in the sense that it's real time. So it really is that metadata is what makes data meaningful. And actually, the forward-thinking data strategies have to be metadata-centric. So when you saw earlier, when I was talking about data fabrics, data hubs, knowledge graphs, it's because they are very metadata-centric, business-friendly data architectures that make data valuable, usable, secure, and trustworthy. So what is a semantic data catalog? Let's talk about three different ways of seeing data. Typically, we'll get asked, someone will say, what I need is a data inventory, a data catalog. And we might call that a physical model. We've got in the data definition side, in the physical model, we've got things like the data definitions, right? Where we record the format that the data is stored in, it's maintained by the data department, and then we have the logical model, which is where the business can model its information about how it sees the thing. So it's not just about where the data is stored and what the fields are typed. It's what and who uses, if you like, who are the actors who use the systems, who use the data, and why that data is and how that data is connected to the business. And the last is the conceptual model, which is where we're really talking about business concepts. So when we think about, I need a data catalog, when the old way of working, typically everyone thinks about the physical model. But actually, in reality, when we want to govern the data used across the different audiences in a business, we need to not only think about the technical specifications of that data, we may even need to know and understand the conceptual piece of the business all the way through to some competitive analysis, as in this case, and who's in charge of it and whatever, and which department is responsible for competitive analysis is in this example. So governance is not just related to physical specifications of data and where it's kept and what it's structured as. It actually follows a business. If it's a data-oriented business, it actually follows all the way across the organization, and you need to be able to have the conceptual model, the logical model, and the physical model. And that's a big difference between traditional data catalogs and the MarkLogic data catalog, which can be just a physical model, can be a physical and a logical model, but equally can span the three. And that's why we call it a semantic data catalog. What this allows us to do is to join up the business everywhere from the technical through to the full business. And it's this semantic lineage that links the physical to the conceptual. Why is this important? My slides are not moving on now. There we go. So let's get some background. The conceptual data model sets out the key entities of interest to your business. It's aligned with industry-specific standards such as ISO 21549 if you're in health informatics, ISO 55001 if you're in asset management. There are lots of different standards for the conceptual data model. And the logical data model includes entities and their characteristics. And the physical data model shows the locations of entities in systems which make, if you like, to hold a master for each entity, all that stuff. But why is it useful? It's because by being able to choose whether you don't have to start where most people start at the physical lower level. You don't need to waste effort with a bottom-up approach, start with the physical, spend a few years doing that, move on to the logical and move to conceptual. You can focus your effort where the most benefit lies. And you may choose to start with the logical or work down from the conceptual model and then bring in the physical assets as necessary. So how this makes governance agile is that actually it's not a prescription to document everything first. It's a prescription for being agile about what does your business need, and where can we spend the most productive time. And when we meet our customers in data governance, often they have a conceptual model of how they want it to be, and that's the right place to start. And then they link it link it over time to the logical model and actually get on with the physical bits once they know what is the important data in their organizations that needs attention from a governance perspective. There's another view here, which is I've only really been talking about the left-hand side of this spectrum for that last couple of slides. When people think of governance, they think of a data catalog. They may get as far as we've talked about into a business glossary and some reference data. But the reality is that why do you want to have a data catalog? Why do you want to have a business glossary? And why potentially, if you advance, you'd want a semantic data catalog, who I've just outlined. Well, the reason is you actually want to be able to put all of this governance knowledge to work across your organization. And the way it can be done, it can be everything from, let's start with the data catalog, but actually, ultimately, because we want to have high quality data, we want trustworthy data in everything that we do in our organization. So we need, if you like, the left-hand side of this screen needs to be tight, but actually the putting it to work is everything from the semantic data extraction onwards. And so what we're ultimately doing is we're widening the scope of data and data governance to drive business action. We're ensuring wherever that data is being used and consumed, that data is of high quality, that it is complete, that it is fully secure, and that it is governed. And we're doing that in lockstep with data as it flows through the supply chain, and in lockstep with data as it's being managed within the single unified data platform. So there's no need to think about a separate governance and then a separate metadata management application and a separate, lineage system and everything, because it's all built in as a fundamental capability of our unified data platform. The benefits, ultimately, of the data governance and the metadata management, which you remember is right at the center, is that you could get a lower cost of entry, faster time to value, and higher quality data. That is ultimately what we're looking to do. It's highly flexible because the data catalog can be built over time. The consistency is provided because the semantics is providing a universal language. We can harmonize and normalize metadata definitions across systems. The coverage is rich because the multi-model can handle any kind of data of any type. And so the coverage doesn't stop at just rows and columns of a SQL database for your governance. You can govern all of your different data types in the multi-model. And what it allows is for the business users to understand it, because we have coupled the data with its meaning and all the other governance attributes with it. So actually you can follow how the data moves, what transformations it's going through, who the actors have been who've touched it and all that stuff, from the same place. So that leads me to summary. Really, it's about data and metadata as a single unified resource. One of those resources is the governance resource, the data governance state, managed by the model as much as the context is provided by the multi-model, which gives us the data agility. We have one place to go for all of our different data and metadata, so all of its meanings, which allows us to quickly and easily make change to how any information is interpreted and acted upon at any scale and any purpose, right? And on the other side of this slide, we've got the knowledge that our data held within our data platform is fully governed, trusted, and secure, and we can gain traceable, transparent, repeatable, and auditable results that business users can understand. And that's how we get to the good governed data.
Jeremy, thank you very much. It is a fascinating topic, and it's an all-encompassing topic, I think, for anybody that's in data, for anybody that's thinking about not just the application of the data, but how do you manage that data? How do you keep that data well governed? So yeah, thank you very much. Just some questions that I have for you that I've noted down as we've been talking. People talk a lot about data lineage and data provenance. Are they basically the same idea? Are we talking about the same thing when we use those two terms?
I'd say we're talking about two sides of the same coin, but they are actually distinct concepts in the context of data governance. So traditionally, and then I'll add some thought to this too. I'll just talk about what most people think of as lineage, and then I'll show you why I think we need to move that idea on a bit. But lineage refers to the history of data and the transformations it underwent from its creation to its current state. Okay, we all know data goes through change. It gets updated, it gets moved, it comes from different places. But lineage, the idea, typically indeed includes the details about where the data came from, what processes and if transformations it underwent, and who was responsible for those changes. All right.
Gotcha.
So it's used and it's useful for tracing errors or discrepancies. So let's say in my first example of the floods in San Jose, when we are looking to see if there was a problem with the source of the data or some change in the transformation that happened that caused the data to become poor quality, you typically use a sort of lineage idea to trace errors and the discrepancies of the data back to their source, right? Provenance is the other side of the coin. It typically refers to the origin, the ownership, and the custody over time. So right. It's used to establish the authenticity, the reliability, trustworthiness of the data, and who was responsible for any changes that were made to it. So yes, they're both right at the center of governance, but they do actually have, if you've got really into it, they have that distinct difference to them.
And I'm guessing that's one of the reasons why customers choose us then, because of the bitemporality built into Mark logic.
That's exactly right.
Track that lineage.
Yeah. Bitemporal is wonderful because particularly if you're a regulated industry, the regulators are incredibly curious for and demanding of data, and they don't mind whether it's they don't care whether you have a difficult time getting it together or not. So if they're asking questions from 3 years ago, you clearly don't want to give them you have to give them a picture of 3 years ago. But actually the management of sort of, if you like, traditional sort of database dumps and things like that is hideously expensive, when in fact with multi-model you can say, oh, what we knew at that point in time 3 years ago was this, because the state of the data was this. So it's amazing. I call it a time machine, because it allows you, to satisfy and prove the data that you had at the time came up with, maybe this is why you made such a decision. And it's all done intrinsic to the platform.
Yeah, and I guess that also, businesses are able to then make informed reviews of decisions.
Absolutely.
So, they can then say, okay, this is the reason why we made these decisions, because the data changed along the way in this way, shape, or form. Okay,
yeah, and you can see, to take an extreme example, we're doing, looking at some sort of, rapid trading system, and you can say, well, what was the data? What did the data look like at 1 second past midday? Boom. And then at 3 seconds past midday, it's completely changed. And the ability to be able to go back and prove that when you gave the answer at 2 seconds past midday, you were using the data of the 1 second past midday, but actually then, and there's a reason why that decision was made, because only a second later it actually changed, but you actually didn't know that because you were a second behind, if you see what I mean. So that's an extreme example, but it really shows the power of being able to prove what you knew at a point in time.
Yeah, okay, no, that's really interesting. I think, also, looking outside of finance and sort of, applications
any
that
regulated
be
business
useful.
is really interested in this, and it's not just regulated businesses, but it's particularly useful when you've got a regulator on your back asking you questions and you haven't got long to answer. But that can be equally the same as having someone from the finance department talking to you and saying, well, what did you know about this particular thing? And it's got nothing to do with being regulated. It's just, what did you know at this point in time? And this what we call bitemporal is a brilliant core part of the data platform.
Yeah, no, that's great. We've had a number of customers use us for various governance, MDM solutions, things like that. We often hear people talk about building these platforms using specialized tools, integrating those technologies. Why is MarkLogic's single data platform approach? What's the benefits of that versus those specialist tools?
Time to value is very important. So let's look at the alternatives before I go into the benefits. The alternative of taking a single unified data platform approach is to go out and source from different vendors, the different elements. And last count, we were at about 17 or 18 different, if you like, software types to get what you get in the MarkLogic platform. So metadata management would be one type, a graph database would be a second type, a document data store would be a third type, some master data management would be a fourth type. So that's the alternative, is take the older way of working, which is get lots of different software applications and spend a fortune integrating them all together. Now it's slightly more modern now, so you can still take lots of different software platforms, but some of them are free, but you still have to spend a fortune integrating them together. Or you can go to a single unified data platform, which is MarkLogic, and you don't have to do all of this work. So that's one aspect, but it's not actually the main aspect. What happens when you take this integration-centric approach is you're building more complexity into your data ecosystem. And complexity means you have an inability. It's quite brittle once it's built. Even if you've decided to spend that fortune, you've built it, but now you can't change it, because to change it, you've got to go and do all the version control across all the different integrations with all the different vendor stacks that you've actually put into it. So that's not just an agility issue, but it's also an operational risk issue, because now your system, if you like, is a one-off, which is not under maintenance, because it's got to be maintained by your systems integrator or your own IT. And any change from any vendor causes a potential integration-centric ripple, which requires a huge amount of analysis. So that's the two approaches. The old way of working has been to take an application-centric approach, which means that you're application-centric, so you're naturally integration-dependent. Whereas with some of the more modern architectures of fabrics and hubs and knowledge graphs, what the world is really crying out for is data agility, the ability to respond quickly to business change, because we're not here to support a database, we're here to support a business, and business gets frustrated when it can't see their systems responding as quickly and being as agile as they need to be when they are going through massive change, innovating, responding to, world events, and all that stuff. And their systems simply can't keep up. And the reason for that being not to keep up is integration centricity. It's actually mathematically, it's a function of to the power of 2. So the more integrations, the more complexity, the harder it is to effect change. Right, and the opposite, you've got the let's take a single data platform approach where everything is there, it's all under maintenance. The speed to implement is much faster. The cost of ownership is much lower when you include all of it together, and the risk is lower. That would be my response to that.
So maybe then, sort of going completely the opposite way. A lot of people say, we just need a data catalog. And in fact, one of the questions that's come in from the chat is, what tool can we use to build a semantic data catalog? So what would be your answer to kind of both of them, really? I just need a data catalog, or I want to build it. What tool can I use?
I mean, absolutely. I think we often, when we meet customers for the first time, you're becoming a new customer of MarkLogic, often the project you're specifically interested in implementing is a data catalog. My answer would be you can implement MarkLogic data platform as a data catalog. We would want to show you the value of not just looking at the physical side, but going all the way through to the conceptual side. But it's then called a semantic data catalog. But you can license that from MarkLogic, and that's it. No more discussion. As a business, though, our job or our vision is that the data platform is used in many different use cases, of which data catalog is one use case. And our approach to business is we have to be, sufficiently flexible and pragmatic. We know that many people start their journey with MarkLogic, particularly with MarkLogic Semaphore. They start their journey there. And we want to show you the benefits of adopting the data platform for a lot of different use cases, but absolutely certain that one of the early use cases for MarkLogic, particularly Semaphore, is as a semantic data catalog. And you can license that from us, subscribe from us. And it comes as a product under maintenance with full support. And that's...
Yeah. No, that's great. You talked about the MarkLogic Optic API being a way to query, once, and access all the governance metadata, regardless of its type. Could you expand on that slightly?
I can try. So MarkLogic that supports an API. It's called Optic. We talked a lot about it in previous. In other parts of this vision, because it's been upgraded in the latest release, and it's really very powerful. It's as powerful, if you like, as the universal index, which I didn't mention today, but which is the other side of the MarkLogic data platform, which is what allows its core central, and the universal index allows you to ingest and immediately use data once you've brought the data in or linked to it. So that's how you get the data, if you like, ready for use. But the Optic API is how do you consume that data? Now, one of the things that happens is if you've got a multi-model database, as we do, and you've put some SQL, some rows and columns in it, and you're addressing it through SQL, you have to ask through a SQL API to get back you say, using SQL, give me this data, and you get back a SQL type response. But if you're also wanting to see a document that's you'd have to use a different API to go to the document, and you'll get back your PDF or whatever it is that you need. So that's how the old way, that's how a content management system would work, and a SQL database would work. And let's say you've also, because you've got some modern data in there for analytics, you've got some triples, some graph, right, sitting in the graph model. Right, and that's another of the models that MarkLogic supports. When you do what they use a different query language for that. You do get Sparkle. You give a Sparkle query, and you get back your triples, which is the subject, which is the data, the graph data in its shape. So what you're seeing there is you've got, in order to, if you want to see all the data across the whole, let's say that's data about a single subject, you've now got to have written 3 or 4 queries and interpreted the SQL with the document, with the graph, and potentially with the temporal. Okay,
Yeah.
Optic allows you to do one query, and it gives you back all of the data in the right shape with an interpretation. So you've got to see all your data in one go. And one of the things that you get back is all the metadata that is associated. If you ask for it, give me all the metadata about this data element, you'll get back all the data, metadata as well, through one query, not 9 different queries in the different formats. And then one of those data types could be an important piece of governance data. So Optic allows, in the same way the universal index is allowing all data to be immediately available for use from a single API, the Optic API is allowing all data to be consumed through a single API, through a single query.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, there is some really good examples of that. I know Jeremy mentioned it. John Snelson did a Optic API session for us.
He does it a much better subject. He's much better at it than I am in explaining it. But
yeah, no, he's really good. It's worth watching his discussion. It's also worth checking out the MarkLogic 11 technical deep dive, because there's a preview of some of the updates to that feature. So if you've been using that already, please do check that out. How, going back to sort of the architecture of the system, really, is how does all this play into the rise of new data architectures, like I'm thinking data fabrics or data meshes, things that are coming out that seem to be gaining traction?
I may have alluded to it already, but I'll try and make it clearer. So the way, and I certainly talked about being application centric, which basically, if you're at the world for very good reason, there's been an Uber architecture, an Uber architecture, if you like, where we've all gone since 1965. We've said, well, first you build an application and your data is subordinate to the application. That subordination was for very good reasons: limitation of resource, limitations of memory, and the earlier you go back, the even more codified it was. But ultimately, there wasn't enough stuff to store, sufficient levels of data. Data is subordinate to the application, and that gave rise to a massive number of data silos, and every organization has them. And that world lasted for 30 years, for 50 years. What we now have is we actually have, change. We've almost got free MIPS on the cloud, so we don't have a problem with resource. We've got data-driven economy, data-driven organizations, where data can't be the second-class citizen, if I can use a term like that. It needs to be the dominant persona. Data is what is important. The application should come subordinate, should hang off the data and supply chain. Now, that's really hard to do if you've got, if you're suggesting, oh, well, we can't do that. We've got all this investment in our existing data systems. And of course you have, and no one's suggesting that you shouldn't have and keep using those investments in, if you like, what we call the old way of working, where data comes second and applications are first. But actually, if you think about it, a lot of the work around data warehousing and data lakes has really been to try and make it better, to try and remove that silo effect. But it hasn't really worked yet, because the quality of the data has been there. So when you start looking at and I'll get to the answer, when you start looking at the rise of data hubs, we have a very good one. Data fabrics, we can be a very good one. Knowledge graphs, they're really saying, sitting alongside your existing ecosystem, data ecosystem, you can add something that actually makes data the dominant persona, the persona, the first class citizen, because data is what is driving our economy, our decisions, everything. and we need it to be capable of rapid response to change. And when you start to look at what data fabrics and knowledge graphs and data hubs are doing, is they're basically saying we'll sit in front of your, now integration paralyzed ecosystem, but it's all working. It's operational. It works. We're used to it. We know how it works. But we've got something here which provides this data agility. Now, I don't believe our customers are calling it a data fabric yet. Some of our customers are calling it a data hub, but ultimately it is making the role of data preeminent in a data-driven world, which has changed because we're now, cloud data-driven with massive resources. When the centricity of the past was because we didn't have free MIPS, massive amounts of networking, huge amounts of data storage, and it was okay to be application centric. It isn't anymore because every businesses have to be joined up.
I've just closed the presentation because I just wanted to close with one last question, which I think there's probably a lot of people on the call wanting to ask, which is, what makes MarkLogic so good at governance as a whole?
It isn't a set. What is it so good at? Governance is at its core, right? If you accept that high quality data is a requirement, trustworthy data is a requirement, knowing where your data's been is a requirement, knowing where the document of source, where that data came from is important, then right at its core of MarkLogic is the governance gene, if you like.
Yeah. No,
and it's not an afterthought, and it's not a tax.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and I think there's a lot more to do on this subject, and I know that we've got a regulatory compliance demo next week by one of our senior engineers. So that's going to be on the 15th, I believe. So make sure to join that demo. And I said to Jeremy before this call, I'm going to bring him back for a conversation on regulatory compliance, how MarkLogic can affect the business, how it can drive change, and also make sure that you're complying with those regulations and giving those regulators what they need. So yeah, Jeremy, thank you very much for today. I had one last question come in about today's progress announcement, about the closing of the acquisition, the business model. What can we expect from the organization? It's very early days yet. We're all very excited here at Now Progress MarkLogic, and we're looking forward to working with the extended Progress team. They've got a number of tools that really do fit well with MarkLogic's technology. Hence, the acquisition made perfect sense, and we're really excited to see what that can deliver both for our customers and for Progress's customers as well. We will make sure to bring them onto a Bright Talk discussion to introduce them properly once we've had chance to connect all the teams together. But at the moment, we're very excited. More details can be found on marklogic.com. I think there's a banner at the top there with the announcement, as well as on progress.com as well. So yeah, just wanted to thank Jeremy once again for his time today. And thank you very much for all of your questions. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Like I said, check out next week's demo on regulatory compliance with one of our senior engineers, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Jeremy, thank you very much, and yeah, talk again soon. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.